Hello and welcome back. My name is Jordan and I am here today to say that you are love-worthy. Now, if you haven't seen my first video, I would recommend watching that one first. It will make this video just a little bit easier to understand. Now, my first video is entitled Homosexuality is Not a Sin, It is Biblical. This can be found on the Loveworthy Facebook and YouTube page. Now, to recap that video just very quickly, we established that the Bible is anti-pedophilia and not anti-homosexuality. We found that the verses in Leviticus and 1 Corinthians were mistranslated during the Protestant Reformation and were translated from man shall not sleep with young boys to man shall not sleep with man. I also discussed how Jesus healed another man's significant other, and the significant other was also a male. So if that interests you, definitely check that video out. I'd like to discuss now the origin of homophobia in Christianity, because I think this is very important to know where everything stems from, why our Bibles now today were translated into these verses where it wasn't originally. Now this is actually going to center around one single man. Now this man's name was Theodosius I. He was also known as Theodosius the Great. Now, Theodosius ruled Rome from the years 379 to 395 AD. Notably, he ruled by himself from the years 392 to 395 AD. Now, he was a Roman emperor, so the normal conquer, get more land, more wealth, the usual. However, it was unusual because in the first few years of his reign, 379 and 380, he was very sick. He was bedridden and very ill. He didn't think he was going to get better. So he said that if he did get a recovery, that he would dedicate his life to Jesus. Well, he did recover. And one of the first things he did after his recovery is he made Nicene Christianity as the main religion of Rome. Now, this may sound like a good thing of saying Christianity is the main religion of Rome. However, all the things that he did show that this wasn't really about Christianity, that this was actually about gaining more power, gaining more wealth, and making sure that the correct people were on his side. And I'll discuss that in this video. As far as Nicene Christianity, Nicene Christianity was established in the year 325, where the Council of Nicaea met and they established the relationship between God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. Now, the Nicene Creed is essentially what most Christian followers follow today. It's that God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit are all one being, or in the terms of Nicaea, one essence. Okay, now there were other areas of Christianity back then that believed in Jesus, believed that he was God. However, they thought that Jesus was new once he was born into the earth. And this was meaning that he was a brand new being and that he wasn't there originally, versus Christians today say that Jesus has been there since the beginning, since he is a part of God. So the Nicene Creed was essentially establishing that this was the core belief, and anything outside of that would be incorrect. Now, when Theodosius I declared Nicene Christianity as the main religion of Rome, he did it, again, for political gains. And what I mean by that is anybody that was not a Nicene Christian, so this included other Christians, also pagans and many other religions, they lost their status as a legal citizen. They lost their ability to own and buy property. They lost the ability to obtain things from family members' wills. All of these things were confiscated by the Roman government. So all of these people lost everything. They lost their livelihood. They lost their property. And this clearly is about political gain. He gained all these people's properties, all these people's wealth, and he's making it so that they're easier to rule and they're weaker. Now, I will give more examples of this. We're going to go ahead and fast forward to the year 389. And he started making more anti-pagan laws specifically, but also anti laws for other religions as well. and he did the same thing as before, where you lost everything. But in addition to that, he made it so that all pagan temples were removed, all Roman temples were removed. The act of going to any of these temples would become illegal for any of the governors. He also made it so that anybody in church had to be a Nicene Christian. Anybody that was not a Nicene Christian would be taken from their position immediately. Now, when he did all of these things and he gained more and more properties, I just want to again point out, if this was about Christianity and Jesus, and if this was about making Jesus number one, he wouldn't have went through all the trouble of taking all the people's things. That just doesn't coincide. Now, in the year 390, he publishes the Lex Dei, which translates to the law of God. This is decreed throughout Rome, and at this point is when homosexuality is illegal. And I say that loosely because of the terminology of the law. Now, the law ends up reading, any man that takes the role of a woman will be publicly burned to death. So he makes it so it's illegal to be homosexual, kind of. He made it so that only one out of the two parties would get in trouble. So he made it so, again, you could engage in homosexual relations, but if you were taking the role of the woman, that's a problem. That's when you're going to go to jail, get your things confiscated, or just straight up sentenced to death. Now, this is very, very important. The wording of this is because this has a lot to do with Roman culture. Now, as discussed in my previous video, in the Roman culture, they were very loose with homosexuality. Many people were homosexual and bisexual. It was just something very common. But there were still some very small taboos. And one of those taboos was if a homosexual or bisexual man was seeking relations with another man, either for a single night of pleasure or for an actual relationship, he would find someone who was in a lower class than him. Now, Romans did have relations with other Romans in the same class. However, it just wasn't encouraged. It wasn't illegal. It still happened. It just wasn't normalized. So now we understand that we have a Roman citizen of a higher stature having relations with another Roman of a lower stature. Now, the person of the lower stature traditionally would be the one to, and I quote the law, take the role as the woman. So as you can see, this law was protecting the higher class Roman men, while again taking away from the lower class. So when Theodosius made this law, he made it so he protected the higher ups, he protected the ones that were able to help him, and then all the people underneath, he continued to gain from them. Again, if this was actually about homosexuality or about Jesus, he would have had both parties in trouble. Instead, just the lower classmen. So that doesn't quite sit right with me. Another thing to just kind of show what type of person Theodosius I was and his need for power and control is a story about a charioteer. Now, I do apologize for the brutality of this story in advance, but I feel that it needs to be heard in order to understand the type of person that Theodosius was. So in the year 390, there was a charioteer, and the charioteer were people who rode in the chariots, and this was specifically during the Olympics. This was a man who represented Thessalonica, and he was very well respected by the people. So he was convicted of having homosexual relations, well, of being, quote unquote, the woman, and he was sentenced to death by Theodosius. So the people are very upset. They're not used to this. They're used to homosexuality being a normal way of life. So they're upset. Understandably, everything is changing rather quickly. So they storm the jail. They kill the governor. They take the charioteer and say, "We have you. You're safe." So Theodosius I comes back, says, "Okay, all right, all is forgiven. It is what it is. We're actually going to have another game. We'll have this charioteer be the main contender. So you guys show up on that date." So the people, thinking that they had won on the date that Theodosius I chose, had everybody go to see the games, to see the charioteer and support him. When the games were to start, he closed the gates and he massacred all 7,000 people that showed up. Now, when he did this, he effectively massacred almost all of the pagan population, as well as many other religions and Christians. The reason why I say pagan is because the Olympics were traditionally for polytheism, for the god Zeus, and there are also many pagan aspects to the Olympics, which is why Theodosius I also outlawed the Olympics a few years later. But this just shows the type of person Theodosius I is. It's all about control. It's all about making sure the people listen. He's making sure his higher ups are taken care of. He's making sure the lower people stay in line. Now, it is notable to mention that the church did condemn what Theodosius I did, and they refused to support him again until he repented and was shown penance. So, that's Theodosius I. As you can tell, the laws that he enacted were not to benefit Christianity. All of these things were to promote himself. If it was about Christianity, he wouldn't have taken all these things from the people. If it was about homosexuality being an issue, he would have made it illegal for both parties to participate. Again, he was protecting the ones that needed to be protected for his position of power. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is the origin of homophobia. Up until that year, there were several publications in literature praising homosexuality, saying that it's a good thing, and it was just abundant. And after the year 390, when it was made illegal, they just kind of disappeared. And from there, more and more laws were enacted, and it got worse and worse. So I think it's important for people to understand this is where homophobia began. At this point in time in 390, nowhere in the Bible did it say homosexuality was a problem. It was only talked about in the church. About, hey, is this an issue? Is it not? We're not sure. And this kind of is where it stems from. Help some people out there today, or at least help you learn something. Thank you to everybody who watched. I just want to say stay tuned. I will be posting more videos. Let me know in the comments what you want me to talk about next. Other than that, just remember that you are love worthy. Bye.